Okay, folks, if I could get you to retake your seats, please. And whilst you're doing that, I'm going to introduce you to John Morton. I know I keep saying this. John will be well known to many of you in the room. Lots of well-known people here today. So John is a veterinarian and also an epidemiologist. Ironically, I think for most of us, the word epidemiology was completely unknown until March 2019, and now every one of us can describe it to you in fluid and vast detail. So John has worked in the dairy industry his entire life, originally with the Department of Ag, then was responsible for the National Herd Fertility project, which was the basis for his PhD back in 2013? No, 2006. 2004, okay. And then subsequently became the basis for the NCAF program. John has worked on data sets far and wide and all sorts of different analysis, both within the cattle industry and also outside of the cattle industry. It's no stretch to say that he's one of the preeminent epidemiologists and statisticians within the Australian dairy industry and the animal husbandry industry more widely. So John's going to share with us some of the rummaging, is that the right word?
Sure.
That he's been doing through various data sets to do with animal performance in the dairy industry. John, thanks very much.
Thanks, John. How do I go? Or do I do something here? Oh, there we go. That's the real title of what I was going to talk about. All that stuff there, actually Michelle wrote that and didn't even ask me what I thought of it. And I didn't realise how obvious it was, the way I was behaving, but it's bang on. It is absolutely bang on, and you'll see that coming through today, especially this point about farm level. I don't quite know why the questions I ask have not got answers, because to me they're fairly fundamental. So this is some work with Hurt and Michelle from DataGene, also Steph from Dairy Australia. Just before I'm really nervous I'm going to miss this point. To me, the major point for me from the session before morning tea was started by Matt, and Matt made it twice, and then Lan picked up on it as well. And Matt can correct me if I got the point wrong, but Matt basically said, all these farmers that are testing heifers for the first time this year, if all they do is cull on that basis and nothing else, they haven't got much from it. Yeah, he's not in. Sure, I got it right. And to me, I reached the exact same conclusion here, the exact same conclusion. So I think that's a key point as to what else we're going to do with this data, apart from sell some surplus heifers. The farm level thing, the way I think about it is like this. It's sort of like my grandkids. My grandkids always ask why. Why? And in fact, yesterday I had 5 whys in a row. I obviously wasn't getting to the point. What do you want these to go up for? Well, do you want those to go up so you get better cows? This is from the point of view of fertility only. Well, what do you want that for? Well, you want that to get that, a better herd average daughter fertility. What do you want that for? Well, because better fertility. What do you want that for? Well, farmers value that. So it seems to me, unless we get all the way through to the end, the whole thing's been academic. Now, it's pretty obvious. It isn't academic, but if we didn't get through to the end, it would be academic. And then, on top of that, I can add in genomic selection. What do you want to do that for? Well, because you want that, and so on. What about inbreeding? What do you want that for? Well, you want that to get cows with better inbreeding coefficients. What do you want that for? Well, to get that. So therefore, I draw this big circle around here and say, look, the big picture is that finally it's at the herd end. The herd end is the big picture. All this stuff here is crucial, but it is the engine room, but is the means to the end. And I'll come back onto that point at the end. I just wanted to, this is almost like a case study in a sense. Just imagine you've got a herd that's like this. They've got 100 AI side heifers, let's say they're that old, they only want 50. They're pretty sure it's profitable to rear some surplus heifers, yeah? So, in other words, the benefits, where are we here, are far greater than the costs. And furthermore, the heifers are better than the other options I've got for that extra pasture and forage. So that's the situation for this hypothetical herd. Also practical, they got the staff and the facilities so they can handle some extra heifers, so they're going to do it. Really crucially, they don't want to increase herd size, so they're not going to put their surplus into the herd because they said we're not going to increase herd size. So by definition, they're not going in the herd. Furthermore, their current replacement rate's about optimal, so those heifers aren't going into the herd for that reason. And certainly you can have replacement rates that are too high. So that's the situation. So what are they going to do? Well, three options of those three. On genomics, earliest born for the seasonal split calving herds, irrelevant for year-round calving, or some other way of picking 50 out of 100. So in a way, this bit of work was having a go at what's the best option for this particular situation. And we did two things. We got a whole lot of data, gene data. Every genome that we tested heifer in the database, born between those dates, and there was 25,000 of them. We picked out those dates because we didn't want heifers that have calved, because as soon as they calve, they start getting data which influences their breeding value. But we wanted heifers that were just like this herd. There's no data coming in from their own calvings because they're only 4 to 7 months old. So it's just parentage plus genomics. There's no further data. In fact, 3 of those heifers had calved, so you can imagine they got deleted straight away. And then on top of that, we did some simulation modelling to just get a handle on the impact of these various options. And one thing, this is pretty obvious to you guys, but it did make me think. Imagine you've got a line of heifers, and I really love seeing a line of heifers, really well grown, beautiful condition, pretty even, all good size, probably all good mums. And I'm sort of really tempted to think, gee, they're probably fairly homogeneous. You can probably tell where I'm going here, Pete, on this. In fact, we got the ABVs, of course, for these heifers from the DataGene database, and they're not homogeneous, of course. Now, each bar is a group of heifers in a year, so this will be a group of heifers for one herd for 1 year, and over here, every bar is a separate group of heifers for a separate year. And this is protein ABV, so clearly some groups of heifers are well ahead of others on protein ABV. But what I want to focus on, just let me rearrange those bars so that they're all centred along the same line, rightio? So rather than that, this is the exact same set of bars, but I've just queued them up with 0 as the 0 along here, because what I want to look at is the spread. And the first thing I notice is the spread varies a fair bit between groups. Some groups have got a lot of spread, and some groups have got a fair bit less. So we'll come on to that later as well. That turns out to be a fairly important point. But in fact, no group's got no spread. So these are not homogeneous heifers genetically at all, not at all. And the reliabilities, mostly these heifer groups had fairly tight ranges of reliability. Now remember, these are parent plus genomic only. There's no animals' own data coming in yet. But occasionally you get some spread down here. Again, this is a bunch of heifers. The best one, the middle ones are in here, and the low ones are down here, and the really low ones get their own special dot. So these animals down here presumably heard just the parentage data wasn't there. What else might be a cause of a low reliability herd?
Well, there might be some weird crosses or something.
Oh, some weird crosses. In theory, they're all Holsteins, but in fact, they may not have been Holsteins. Yeah, sure. I forgot to say too, there's 95 bunches of animals I analysed here. These were the bunches where I reckon I was pretty sure that most of the heifers had been done, if not all of them. I didn't want mobs where, say, just a handful had been tested. So at least 40 heifers, all Holstein, and probably all tested. So there's a few points in that, which will turn out to be important later. Daughter fertility, same story in every single way to protein ABV. Some groups of heifers are well ahead of others. So these guys here, their average is about 112 on daughter fertility ABV. That's the heifers coming into the herd. It's amazing. We're down here, these guys are about 105. But the same story, spread within groups. The spread is narrow in some mobs and much wider in the other. Reliabilities, that'll be the same group, low reliability for daughter fertility as for protein ABV. Same story with BPI, so exactly the same story again. Enormous spread within groups. What happened there? And the spread is more in some groups than others, and the reliabilities are by and large pretty tight, but some groups have quite low reliabilities, at least in some animals. And the other thing I looked at was when they calved, and this turns out to be a fairly important point in this whole process. This was just seasonal and split calving herds. I chucked all the year-round calving herds out of this. And I was quite amazed at how many animals were born after the first 6 weeks of the herd's calving period. Quite a long way through here. People are keeping late-born heifers. Now, the point is, they've got to grow faster than them. If these are seasonal and split calving herds, so they've got to make a mating weight. If you assume 320, and now some would say 320 is a bit light, some would say they ought to be 350, but let's go 320. They can do 19 kilos a month and they'll make it from weaning to mating start date. They've got to do 24. So these guys have got to catch up, or the penalty could be quite large. And they're probably only going to catch up through preferential feeding and possibly more expensive feeds. I'll be keen to ask Jake Musson's talking about cost of rearing heifers this afternoon, but late-born calves, we'll come on to that as well. So then we started the simulation modelling, and I just wanted to show you some stuff that's going on inside that simulation. This is replicate number 1 of 10,000. I did 10,000 replicates just to get a confident answer about what's going on. This is protein ABV, and this is a true breeding value for protein. Now you can never see this, and you can't measure it by definition. The best measure we've got is this, but you can actually mathematically simulate it. So each dot is a simulated heifer, and I'm graphing their true value against their ABV, the one we get in the reports. And we'd love to keep all the high ones. Yeah? So let's say this says I'll select the heifers on protein ABV. So I want to keep all those ones over to the right of that dotted line. Yeah? But in fact, what I will keep is all the ones above the solid line. Yeah? Because I haven't got this, I've got that. High ABV, I'll keep all them. Now, it's pretty good with protein. In this particular replicate, we're doing pretty well because most of the ones that are over this side of the dotted line, in fact, are also above the solid line. Yeah? So this is really good. We've done well here. Down here, we've also done well because these are low on both. And they're the ones, by definition, we're prepared to sell. There's a few little annoying ones in here. These guys are actually high on true value, but they're going to get sold, yeah, because the ABV came out low. And these little guys here are scraping in. They actually are low on protein, true breeding value, but they get in because they got a high ABV. They only just got in, by the way. Another way to look at it is this. Here's the 100 heifers, and this is all their true breeding values. And we're going to keep the black ones, yeah? So these guys, that's good. We didn't want them, and they're going to get sold. These guys, we wanted them, and they're going to get kept. There's a couple here, I wish we didn't keep those two, and I wish we kept that one, you know, but we've done pretty well. Let's do daughter fertility breeding value. So what do you notice first about that graph compared to that graph? So Peter, what do you notice first?
A little more open.
Yeah, more open. Far more scatter. Why is there more scatter? Why is there more scatter?
Lower reliability.
Exactly. Low reliability. I've assumed 0.77 for the protein, just the typical for the heifer groups. 0.48, yeah? Low reliability. As a consequence, there's more animals out here that we're getting them wrong. We wish we kept these guys and they're going to get sold. We wish we kept these guys. Sorry, I wish we didn't keep these guys and we kept them. Or over here on this graph, we're selling the black ones and keeping keeping the black ones and selling the light-coloured ones. A lot more overlap, a lot more mistakes, if you like. So when you hear geneticists talking about reliability, this is why they love reliability. When you hear Jenny talk about we've got to improve the reliability of the daughter fertility breeding value, this is precisely why she's saying it, exactly why she's saying it. And this would be the nirvana, of course, reliability of 100%. Every animal we want to keep, we keep, and every animal that we want to sell, we sell. That's the nirvana. And at the other extreme, at one stage, Herd said, oh, gee, John, you better check your coding, just run a low reliability through. That's 10%, and that's a complete disaster. In fact, you would almost make no progress genetically if reliabilities were 10%. You might as well just pick them randomly. So reliability matters. That's the only point there. Back to the selection on protein. The alternative, of course, was to select on the 50th early born heifers. And by the way, for the simulation, I did allow that very spread calving, if you like. A lot of late animals in there, which may not apply to all herds. So if we select on protein, we do pretty well in terms of protein. If we select the 50 earliest born, in fact, we're keeping a lot of low protein ABV animals. Also, we're selling some high ones, so there's almost no relationship there. So that's the two choices for this herd. So then we said, well, let's pick the best 50 based on protein. What's that going to do compared to the 50 earliest born? Yeah, so option number 1, based on protein, highest 50 on protein ABV. Option 2, earliest born. If you do this, on average, the 50 you keep will have 4.3 more units of protein breeding value compared to the earliest born. They'll go back slightly on daughter fertility breeding value, and of course, but a lot more of them will be born late. Yeah, and when Michelle saw these results, she said, "Oh, look, that's really cool. You select for protein, you get protein. You select for daughter fertility, you get daughter fertility." And I thought, yeah, of course, it makes sense. If we select on BPI, of course, we get less of each, but we get a little bit of both, and a whole bunch of other traits as well, of course. And just to make a quick point, I'll just go back. These are just the averages. In fact, things will vary by year. Yeah, you'll be lucky some years. So the average for this spread was 4.3. This is for protein. You might be lucky and get 6. You might be unlucky one year and get 2. But overall, long-term average, we're estimating something like 4. Okay. And remember I said those graphs at the start will be important. Well, it turns out they're important. I'll just go back one slide again. I just want to pick out, remember this 4.3 and this 2.8? Let's go forward a slide. So 4.3 is for the typical spread. If you're a little bit less spread, it's down to 4.1, but if you've got a lot of spread, 5.7. So if we could predict which herds these are, there really is some bigger benefits for them over them. Daughter fertility, a little bit the same. If there's a lot of spread in daughter fertility, the benefits are a little bit bigger than if there's not much spread in daughter fertility. That's spread within the mob. And the last thing we said was, oh, well, you're assuming 50 out of 100. What if it's only 60? What if we're going to keep 60 and select 40? In other words, less selection pressure. And of course, the averages drop. This is based on BPI. 50 out of 100, 1.5, 1.1, 17. That's the same numbers as here. 60, numbers drop a little bit. I was a bit surprised, Steph, at 80, there's still a benefit, which is amazing. All we're doing is culling 20 out of 100, and there's still a smidgen of benefit there. I was expecting actually something like 0 there. But nevertheless, the point simply is the higher the selection pressure, the bigger the benefit. Several simplifying assumptions. This is fairly, even though it's complex enough, it's fairly simple from a genetics point of view. So we could do more elegant modelling if that turns out to be useful. So back to the herd. As I said at the start, I'll always finish up with the herd. And this is some stuff I've got out from a different project. These are no longer bunches of heifers. These are actually herds within a year, and this is calving year. And these are herd mean daughter fertility breeding values. So back in 1990, and this was all milk recording herds. I got almost the entire database from someone heard, I think, sent it to me. So back in 1990, for milk recording herds, the average daughter fertility breeding value, or the median, was 108. 108, that's right, yeah. About half the herds were in the inside of that box. There's a quarter of the herds here, another quarter here, and a few outliers. So this came down over time. And then, of course, around about 2011, it started turning around. And this is, I haven't got 2021 data in, but we're going up quite nicely, typically, but an enormous range within a year. This is calving year. So some herds are still way down here, 102, and then some herds up here, 100. Well, that herd there actually is 110. It's quite extraordinary, and probably a smidgen higher for 2021. Now, hypothetically, let's imagine that we started selecting the heifers from 2011 on. Supposing this technology had been around in 2011, Peter, and we could use it, and we'll start selecting our surplus heifers on that. So we do this every year, 2011, 12, 13, so on. We have 100 heifers every year. We keep 50 based on BPI. Okay. So those black dots are what we reckon probably would have happened had we done that. Yeah. So here we are cruising along, pretty much the same as everyone else. 2011 is that year there. So we test the calves that are born that year. Yeah. So then they come into the herd here. So see, there's a little gap there already. That's the 2-year-olds coming into the herd and influencing the herd mean. And of course, as more and more of the herd becomes those selected heifers, of course the herd, your herd, gets higher than the median. Now that's based on BPI, that's about 1.1 units or whatever the number was, 1.5 units. This is daughter fertility breeding value. What's that worth? Well, that's well, on average, these guys will be getting 6-week calf rate about 1.5% better than them. So if these guys say at 50%, this herd's at 52 or something. So a small but nice benefit. No, there's no question we're nudging in the right direction. If in fact you got pretty radical and you just selected those 50 based on daughter fertility, of course the difference becomes far greater, because we're just selecting on daughter fertility and we're not getting the other benefits of BPI, but we are getting daughter fertility because if you select on it, you get it. And that's 2.8. So if a herd down here was like 50, well, you're around about 53, something like that. So pulling all that together, I reckon the benefits of genomic testing in this particular situation will be best if those are known, if the size and genes are known. If there's above average spread, so if we know for whatever reason that there's more spread in this group than in most groups. Now this might be because there's been some pretty bad choices about size in the past. It could be that the herd's been improving really rapidly, so the cows are all over the place because the older cows are way behind the younger ones for a whole bunch of reasons. If we know that, this is when the benefits will be bigger. And if the selection pressure is higher, so 50 out of 100 rather than 80, for example. But if we do select on that, we've got an issue with these late-born calves, because they're going to have to be, in seasonal split calving herds, they're going to have to be managed differently, and possibly it might cost more. I've got to check with Jake about that last statement. But better still, let's make sure the surpluses are all early born, and then there's no issue here, no issue at all. And it seems to me with sex semen and even half decent herd reproductive performance, we can do it. So that would be a nice solution, sex semen in heifers and cows. Or just heifers possibly. And so now I'm back to Matt's point here. At this stage I'm thinking, if I do this, sure, if I can solve the late-born heifer problem, well, sure, there's some benefits in there, but they're not massive. So then I was thinking, well, what else can I get out of this? Which is exactly Matt's point, And one thing I landed on is if eventually we get improved inbreeding prevention through genomics, I'm pretty excited about that. Partly because Beth Scott's told me, inbreeding especially affects traits like survival and fertility, and that's making me quite nervous. But furthermore, there could be other things I get out of genomic testing that are further benefits over and above this stuff. And Matt's example is an absolute ripper, I reckon. If those genomic results mean that herd makes better sire decisions, that is so cool, and that would be hard to quantify the benefit of that, but it could be quite large. Certainly larger than the direct benefits of selecting those heifers, Matt. Yeah. You don't have to agree, but yeah. So that's where that work's got to. Thanks, John.
Folks, can you join me in thanking John for that excellent presentation? We've got time for some questions. Any questions or comments?
Yep. From a practical point of view, John, do you have any sort of a base recommendation for the number of what could be culled off the bottom? My experience is that, say, if you're culling on BPI, the spread in most herds is, 300, 350 BPI to bottom. And so if farmers will say, well, how far along the curve from the bottom should I use beef or should I cull or whatever? Do you have any because you said at 20% you only get a 0.7 improvement, and what's the standard deviation? 2 standard deviations in from the end is kind of like 20-odd%. Is that right? Am I right there? And so can you just cut off the bottom 20%, or should you be aiming for 30%, like generating extra replacements and then using that spread in your advantage? Just wondered if you had a view on how you might practically do that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So one point of that, Matt, is in this, I'm assuming a normal distribution, and I think implied in your question is if we start taking off the end, we make more rapid progress. Once we get into the middle of the curve, every extra heifer is going to give us far less progress, which is absolutely true. Now Hertz made a good point. A normal distribution is actually artificial because in fact heifers have, within a heifer mob there'll be some common size. Yeah, so therefore it won't be as neat as a nice normal distribution. It'll be lumpy. Yeah. and even the dams could be having some influence on that as well. Nevertheless, I still think your point prevails, so that the bigger gains will be tasting, yeah, every extra one you take off will give you a little bit less benefit than the last one you took off, yeah? Now, I must say, though, I have thought about it from the reverse perspective. We've got 100 here, we only want 50, what about the other 50? But you're raising a good point, really, and that is, well, who chose 100? Yeah, so what, yeah... I've got to think about this, Matt. I haven't explicitly chased it down at all. But that is your point, isn't it? So this guy's got 100. Well, maybe he could have had 120, 130. Yeah?
You can plan for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I might even think about whether we can just do a little bit more stuff with this same data, Matt. I reckon.
Cool.
We can do that because we can definitely demonstrate that every extra heifer gives you a little bit less benefit than the last one you culled. Yeah, that's a crucial point in that.
Yeah. Yep. And yep. Thank you.
Never give John another interesting question because he's like a bloody rabbit down the burrow. We might have to pull it up there. Sure. John, thank you very much indeed. Again, thank you. Terrific.